The truth is, not every home in Bend is built for Bend. And the ones that aren't, they'll test your patience, drain your wallet, and make you wish you never moved in. That's why in this video, we're breaking down the 8 types of homes you should never buy in Bend. And if we haven't met yet, my name is Luke Callahan. I'm a realtor here in Bend, Oregon, and I help people make the move to Bend every single day. And most importantly, make sure they buy the right house in the right neighborhood the first time around. All right, so let's get into it. Here we go. Let's start with one of the biggest mistakes people make when buying in Bend. Falling in love with that secluded mountain setting without realizing it's sitting right in a wildfire danger zone. Bend's beauty comes with risk. Homes on the west side, in Tumalo, or even Deschutes River Woods might feel peaceful and private until fire season hits and the insurance companies take one look at your address and say, not today, pal. So over the last few years, we've had wildfire risk maps made that dropped a lot of people's insurance. Luckily, that's been mitigated to some extent, but it's no secret that wildfire is a huge issue here and insurance companies are hip to it. So let's talk about everything you need to know regarding wildfires. If you buy a home in heavy tree cover, poor defensible space, or even just a house that has an old roof, you could face thousands in extra premiums or even no coverage at all. So, this is a huge deal, especially when it comes to insurance. The high-risk areas can actually raise your annual premiums by $3,000 to $6,000 annually if you can even get coverage. Another thing to watch out for is if you're in a high wildfire risk area, you could have a really hard time selling your home. Many buyers will even avoid these zones entirely, which limits, of course, your future marketability. And then the other thing you need to think about in regards to wildfire is your evacuation and safety risks. If you have poor access or maybe just one way in and one way out or long fire response times, that's a huge factor when it comes to insurance. That makes these properties more dangerous. And that's a real thing. If fire's happening and you want to get out, you need to know that you can get out. But the biggest issue here is insurance. And you need to know if you can get your house insured. So before you fall in love with the house, you find the house, you start to fall in love, even before we write an offer, we're gonna get a quote from the insurance agent. That's how important it is, because that's how much of a deal breaker it can be. If you call 6 different insurance agents and you can't get coverage or only one will, and then you just think like, well, if this one insurance agent is the only one who can get me coverage, what happens if they go away? And then I'm left without coverage. This is a huge deal, and not only will affect your ability to protect your home, but as time goes on, your ability to resell the home. So what are we gonna look for? That's it. We're looking for a house that we can get insurance with. Okay, and then what are the highest, so say we have a house we like, but what are the risk areas that insurance companies are looking at? Number 1, the quality of the roof, the material of the roof. If it's a wooden roof, which is very uncommon in Bend, they won't insure it. But even if it's, asphalt or metal, they still may not insure it just because it may be too old. So the age is the biggest factor with the roof. So roof is number 1, and then after that is defensible space. And what that means is basically how much burnable material do you have directly surrounding your property? So if you have sagebrush, if you have wood fire, like wood piles for, home heating too close. What's the material around the house? So ideally it's gravel, non-combustible material for 4, 6, as many feet as possible. And then beyond that, if you're really keen on getting rural property, I would highly encourage you to look into a sprinkler system that can basically irrigate your roof if you have to evacuate, so that you can just kind of flip a switch and go. It's on a timer, and then that way it's just keeping this constant stream of water going down. And then the other thing that's really important is gutters, because gutters can often be the biggest causes of a house burning down. It may not be the whole wildfire sweeping through the neighborhood and burning your house down, but it could be high winds with burning embers floating through the air, and they'll literally drop onto your house, roll down. It could be like a big stick, whatever. The winds can be huge, and then drop into your gutter, start burning in your gutter. And then while your roof material isn't combustible, if it's burning in your gutter and then burning the underlayment, like, the tar paper, the sheathing, that'll catch your roof on fire, and then it's lost. So be mindful of that. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit about wildfire. This is a huge subject that you hear me talk about all the time. And if you want to, nerd out about it, you got more questions, don't hesitate to reach out and give me a call. One more thing that insurance companies are going to look at and that you should consider as well is how far away is your property from the nearest fire department. And basically, if you're beyond, I think it's 10 or 15 minutes, they put you in its own classification, and it really hurts your ability to get insurance, and it jacks up your rates if you're beyond that range. So that's another factor to consider. Okay, next up, we have a huge red flag, and this is one that I really want to help you avoid unless you're absolutely dead set on it, and that is flipped or poorly renovated homes. They might look great online, they look beautiful cosmetically, they've got that HGTV appeal, but if they're not done well, they can be a huge liability. The flipping epidemic, I would call it, is mostly over, and these flipped homes are a real issue. You'll definitely see them in certain neighborhoods around Bend, and the telltale signs that you need to look out for are something that just don't feel right. You'll see something goofy like the countertops not extending all the way to the walls. You'll see basically anything just barely below the surface that just doesn't look right. You'll see the caulking looks really goofy. You'll see all sorts of funny things. And you have to ask yourself, if you start seeing these things, feeling these things, what's going on underneath the surface? Because these guys are coming in to do a quick flip, trying to make cash and get on to the next house. And so you got to look at the structural systems, and you need an astute inspector who's used to looking out for these flips. And I would say largely, if you can, just avoid flips altogether. Now, with that said, I've actually purchased a flip. It was a flip from a bank, and they literally like painted the single pane windows shut. It took me forever to open up all these old 100-year-old windows. And then but the blessing was they put in a new panel. I knew what I was getting into. I wanted a project. If you don't want a project, don't touch a flip. Even if you do want a project, really steer away from a flip. If that's what you're going for, make sure you reach out to me. I can help you navigate it, help you know what's worth getting into and what to absolutely avoid, because there's some things that just aren't worth it. And that's from years of experience remodeling. And you know, when you get done with a remodel on like just a house that was like, wasn't it? You're like, man, I should have just scraped it and started over. But anyways, that takes years of trials and tribulations. So I'm happy to share my experience with you on that front if that's something you're interested in. Another thing you need to look out for in flips is that people aren't getting permits. So if you can't talk to the listing agent, so if you've identified it's a flip, you identified the work is subpar, and you reach out to, say you reach out to me, I'm your buyer's agent, I'll reach out to the listing agent, and if they can't provide receipts, they can't provide warranties, and they can't provide the names of the contractors who did the work, we can't find the permits in the city system, that's a huge red flag, and we're going to avoid it at all costs to protect you. So make sure that stuff is documented, people are standing behind their work, and if they're not, run, don't walk. Okay, I think you got the sense on flips. This leads us perfectly into this section on homes with unpermitted additions or code violations. This is one of the most common ways buyers can get burned and bend. Again, it's something's built well, but it's just not on record, and you're not even aware that it's not on record. That's the biggest thing with all of this is awareness of what's going on. You have to really be a sleuth to be like, hey, I see this ridge line in the roof, and I see this lean-to coming off of it. That's clearly an addition. Let's figure out when it's done. Let's figure out if it's on county record. So always, as a general rule of thumb, if you're trying to figure out if something's unpermitted, look at the county records, and I can show you how to do that. And we'll look at just the general footprint. If the footprint matches, you're in pretty good shape. Obviously, there can be a lot that's happened inside, but if the footprint doesn't match, that's number one. And you'll see that surprisingly common, and especially when it's like a goofy addition. So be mindful of that. Another really common thing to look for is if something's clearly a garage that's been converted to a bedroom. A lot of times these are unpermitted. You know, if somebody has like an unpermitted accessory dwelling unit, a lot of times they've done this because there was like, basically it was illegal to make an accessory dwelling unit, so they were kind of forced into it. You could argue it anyway, but now that the zoning is improved and you can make accessory dwelling units, all this stuff should be on the up and up. So make sure that anytime you see a second unit, anytime you see a converted garage, you're looking at the permits to see what's going on, and then you really got a good inspector. You got me looking at it to look at workmanlike quality and determine if somebody has done a good job with it. Of course, again, this can be an issue because it can be hard to get financing on some unpermitted structures. So that can just be a deal breaker from the beginning if your financing is challenging. The other thing with these issues is that the insurance companies will often not cover you, or at the very least not cover the addition. So you basically say you're insured for X amount, and your house burns down or something occurs, they won't insure that unpermitted square footage. So while you did purchase that unpermitted square footage, they're not going to pay out on it. So there's all sorts of ways you can get burned by unpermitted square footage, and you need to be aware of it. The number one step is awareness. Okay, and then the other thing that can be a total non-starter deal breaker is say you purchase one of these homes and you're like, I'm okay with the unpermitted work. The city can come the day after you close and say, we're not cool with this. You need to get this up to compliance. And that could be truly tearing down. Like I've heard horror stories of these hippies out in the woods building their dream home unpermitted because they wanted to do it artistically. They built this incredibly beautiful home, and it for over $1 million. And the city came out and said, hey, it's not permitted, tear it down. I mean, it happens, and you need to be aware of that. It's unlikely. Cities generally do it on what they call a complaint-driven basis. So if a neighbor complains, that's the deal. And so that's kind of the thing, is if this house has been like that forever and the neighbors haven't complained, there's a low chance they will, but you always want to be protected and err on the conservative side, because it's just too risky otherwise. So I hope that gives you a little sense of how it happens, why it happens, when it happens, and how to protect yourself, and most importantly, to avoid putting yourself at undue risk. That's important. That's the most important thing. Okay, if you're getting value from these videos, I would be so honored if you could like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. It helps the channel grow and lets me know you like it. Okay, let's keep going. Next up, we're talking about those beautiful old homes, 100-year-old charmers. Let's talk about one of the sneakiest money drains in Bend, these older homes that just weren't built for the winters, which is funny because we've always had winters here, but it was just the old West back then. Just get it done. And they build these incredible, charming craftsman homes, but the insulation and the roof especially is a bummer. You'll see these in places like River West, Old Bend, and even Midtown. Many of them were built before our modern R38 in the ceiling insulation standards, and energy efficiency just wasn't a priority back then. So the reasons we got to avoid them: why? High utility costs, and you can spend $1,000 on your heating bill if you have electric heat and poor insulation in the winter. So you got to avoid that. You got to look out for, you could have rooms downstairs that are just always frigid. You leave the doors closed unless you have guests and want to heat them up. Let me tell you a little bit about insulation. The R value, that's basically telling you how good the insulation value is. And the biggest thing for insulating a home is a good hat. And if you're bald like me, you always need a good hat. And the same with houses. You need a good hat and good shoes, aka a good roof, good insulation, and a good foundation. If you have a vaulted ceiling, it needs to be at least R30. And if you have a flat ceiling, like with blown-in insulation or bats up above, you need R49. That's the new code. So it's substantial. So the best way to look and see how much a house is bleeding heat, bleeding money out of your pocket, bleeding comfort, is to literally take a thermal camera and go cruise around in winter and look at the different homes and see how much it's bleeding heat. So that would actually be a cool video for me to do and go cruise around. Let me know if you want to see a video like that where we go and inspect different homes through the winter. So I hope that gives you a good sense, a little primer on, house building efficiency. Let's talk a little bit about basic heating and cooling systems and what to look for with those. So on each of our systems, we want to check the tags and specifically the age of each of our appliances. So for like our AC system, they last for about 15 to 20 years and they cost $6,000 to up to $20,000 to replace. So that's probably the highest ticket. The next is the furnace, which lasts 15 to 20 years and is $4,000 to $8,000 to replace. And then you have the water heater, which lasts 8 to 12 years and is about $2,000 to replace. So that's something that's really important to consider. So we know what the cost of replacement is and how soon you're going to have to be making those capital improvements. And the best way to do it is to make any problem into your advantage. Now we're in this spot where sellers want to sell, and we can look at these aging systems and be like, okay, let's make it happen. Let's get some credits so that you can replace them with less cash out of pocket. We can get creative with that. So that's where we get to do the fun work of saying, yeah, this is old, the house is great. Okay, how do we use this to our advantage? Okay, I hope that helps you understand kind of our opportunities with the heating side of the world and the risks, most importantly. Okay, next up we have one of my favorites is rural property. property, but with rural property, you've got septic and wells. And with that, you have potentially large issues because you're basically your own utility provider, aka you got to provide your own water and you have to provide a means of taking care of your own septic. And so these can be really expensive systems. There's a lot that go into it. I am a total nerd about it. My grandfather used to drill wells. I used to be a well driller. And so I don't know, maybe I got it in my blood or whatever, but I love these systems because yes, they're a higher risk. And if you don't know what you're getting into for it, it can be a money pit. I mean, talk about pouring money down a hole in the ground. You're drilling a well can be $15,000 to $25,000 or more, depending on what treatment systems you need. And you're literally just pouring cash in a hole. It's not great. But if you have your own water system, you don't have to pay somebody for, water, for stormwater. So there's blessings with it, but you have to be educated. So let's talk about them a little bit. Okay, so first up, we've got wells. So there's a few things to talk about. I would say number one is the quality of the water coming out of the wells. The biggest things you need to be aware of are the nitrates and E. coli, coliform. Basically, they will severely impact the potability, the drinkability of that water. And if you have a shallow well, like 20 feet or less, and you have a nearby septic or something else goofy going on, it can contaminate your water supply, and that is, as an Italian would say, non molto bene, not so good, because I think it's obvious. So we have to be aware of that. The other thing that quality-wise with wells that we need to be aware of is arsenic. We can find arsenic. It's from like decomposing rocks underground. There is like a tolerable amount. And there's always the story of the old lady down the street who's lived there her whole life and has always been drinking the water and never had an issue. And bless her, because that is amazing. And if I can do anything in my power, I'm going to keep you from drinking arsenic. So that's a big one. And then the other thing you need to be aware of with quality of water is high iron. And you can tell that if you see these like rust-colored rings in toilets, because they'll truly stain the toilets. They're hard to get out. And it's unsightly when you have guests over. If you have high iron, you can get treatment systems that takes some maintenance, a lot of back flushing, and they could be expensive to install, but it's not a deal breaker. And the same with the arsenic. You can get treatment systems. I would love for you to be on spring water, have that great water to drink, but there are ways to deal with low quality. Now that we talked about the quality, I want to talk about the quantity of water. You want to make sure that your well is producing at least 2 gallons a minute. That's kind of the minimum threshold. Anything above 20, you're styling, because unless you've got exclusive irrigation rights, you're literally not even allowed to, I think, irrigate more than like a quarter acre, half acre garden. Which is funny because it's your well, but the state of Oregon technically owns all of our water, and they're very strict with what you do with it. So all that to say, if you've got 5 gallons, 10 gallons, you're going to be fine. If you're in a low trickle, like even that 2 gallons a minute, you might be in a spot where you want to set up a reservoir of sorts and then pump from that so that the well can kind of and especially if it's the recharge rate, which is important to consider. And so that leads me to talking about how to test the quality. One, you basically get a well driller out there in the due diligence time after an offer has been accepted. We can have them send a sample to a lab to test the quality. And there's two, and it's important to acknowledge, a lot of times the seller will pay for it depending on the circumstance, but just be mindful of that. That's how we can test the quality. And then if we want to test the production, the quantity, we have the well driller do basically a flow test, and they'll run it full bore for like an hour. And they'll see how long it produces, 5 gallons a minute, 10 gallons a minute, 20 gallons a minute before it draws down. And they'll talk about what level they're doing that initial pumping at. And then after 20 minutes, they'll talk, or after it draws down, what level it goes to. And then they'll talk about how quick it takes to recharge. So that's really important to do if you're looking at a well. And then the other thing to do, which I always love to do because my grandfather was a well driller, is you pull up the well drilling logs. And it's actually a pretty cool way to kind of get a lens below ground, because they'll tell you exact what depth the well is at, but they'll tell you what level, what type of rock, what type of soil. It's funny, soils, like the organic soils, they call it overburden, which is such a funny thing because it's where all like the life is, and they call it a burden. But anyways, then it gets into like, okay, then we get into shale, we get into volcanic, we get into whatever a lot of it here is just volcanic but it's really interesting, and it'll tell you what depth the water's at, what depth the pump is set at, what the production rate is. And so you always want to look up the well logs to understand what you're getting into. And again, why I like to look at them is I'll often see if it's a well that my grandfather has drilled, I'll see his signature on it. So it's like, it's a connection to him. Anyways, total nerd about wells. Okay, let's talk about septic next. The biggest thing with septic is, one, is there stinky water around the property? If there is, that's not great. There's always a way to deal with it, but it can be expensive. So anyways, you want to know, is the tank leaking? What's the tank made of? What's the capacity of the tank? Does your tank have a pump in it to pump into a leach field that's at a higher elevation than the tank's at? Are there a lot of trees around the area that could potentially be growing into the pipes and occluding the pipes? So these are all questions you want to ask. Ultimately, the key is water flowing into the tank well? Is it settling? If it's not good, then we troubleshoot all along the way. And then the other thing that's really important to look at is there a record of this septic system on file with the county? As in, like, did somebody install this with a permit or did they bootleg it? I've seen situations where there's actually really cool engineered septic systems, but they're homemade, they're DIY, they work, but the county doesn't acknowledge it, and the county doesn't look kindly on anybody who is pumping sewage into the ground or, flushing sewage into the ground. So again, kind of like what we talked about earlier with unpermitted things, at any point they can call your note due, call you up and say, hey, I see you don't have a septic system on file. You need to do that. And I have seen in that situation where this old, hillbilly guy, which I totally appreciate his ethic of just getting it done, but it's an old time. It's an old era and it's out. And so the buyers of his place had to put in a new septic system. So that's something to be mindful of. I hope that helps you understand the septic and well system. Okay, let's talk about homes that were built before 1990 or homes with foundation, plumbing, or electrical issues. We kind of touched on it earlier, but let's get into it a bit more. We got to check out the quality of their mechanical plumbing systems. We need to make sure everything can handle basically modern electrical demands as everybody's pulling up in their Teslas and want to charge. If you've got an old panel, it's not in the cards for you. So also we want to look at your foundation. Sometimes I'll bring a golf ball with me and pop it inside and see where it rolls to see how bad the floor is. So we want to make sure that we're avoiding and aware because this can be really expensive to fix. Okay, next up, we've got location, and a home near a busy road, industrial area, or a seasonally noisy corridor. This is a huge one and there's nothing to do to remedy it, so I always just try to steer my clients clear of it. Even if you can handle the noise, the next people who buy the house won't want to. It's going to delay your ability to market the house. So be really mindful of the things that we just can't change. I'm all for a project, but you can't change noise. I mean, you can plant things to keep the visual barrier from the road, but the noise is pretty hard to watch out. Even if it's just one street off, depending on the noise, it can be oppressive, really, truly. And especially say we're going to look at houses and we get in there and it's all cozy and the gas fireplace is going and you're like, oh, it's not that bad. And all the windows are closed. And then just wait until summertime and you're sleeping with the windows open and somebody's ripping by on a motorcycle or whatever it is. I mean, it can be incredibly noisy. And so I just want you to be aware of the noise, and I want you to go visit it at the noisiest time of the day. That's rush hour traffic from 8 to 9 or 4 to 6. I want you to see what's going on there. I want you to really get a sense of, can I handle this noise? And can my significant other handle this noise? I want to make sure both people are on the same page. Everybody's on the same page. This is a big one. So make sure that we are sitting with it and even sit there and have a cocktail and see, is it too much? Because it can grind on you. And then you'll get used to it for sure, but you'll be on the phone with somebody and they'll be like, what's that in the background? And you're like, oh yeah, I guess that is the noise. So avoid that. The other thing with this regarding location I want you to be aware of is the parking on the street. What's the parking situation like? Is it hard to get parking like middle of the day? That's a huge red flag. And why is that? Because if it's hard to get parking in the middle of the day when that should be the easiest time to get parking, which it is, then what's it like at the rush hours? What's it like at 5 o'clock? What's it like at 7 o'clock after everybody's gotten home for the evening? But seriously, be mindful of that. So again, anytime we have parking or noise issues, we're checking out in the peak hours to really feel into it. Okay, we've made it to our final point, and that is ice damming. And what is ice damming, you say? This is a huge one that I have so many buyers who have never heard of this that I need to make sure you're absolutely aware of before you buy a house and on the lookout for, because it is brutal. It's just frankly brutal, and it's just like a unique thing that we deal with in Central Oregon. And so it's ice damming. And what is it exactly? It's basically where you get these snows, and it's only like 12 to 18 inches of snow in the winter. So you say you got a foot of snow on the roof, or you got 6 inches of snow on the roof, and it's melting this layer of snow that's between the rest of the snow and the roof, and then that snow is turning to water and running down the roof. Not a big deal, right? Well, it's running down the roof, and then it's hitting the snow, or even a spot where that snow has turned to ice, and it's made an ice dam, and then that water has nowhere to go. So you literally have water ponding on your roof. And so if you have a shallow roof, or you have whatever's going on, you have water sitting on your roof. Even with just like a comp shingle roof, it can get back up under the shingles because that water, it flows down and then it works its way in, as water does, into all the cracks, and then it freezes. And then when it freezes, it lifts up the shingles, it finds its way in, it makes these little cracks, and then sure enough, it thaws again, and then it works its way into the house. And it does that year after year. And so you have to be so mindful of it, because it's a hard thing to deal with, quite frankly. And if you're seeing signs of ice damming on a house, but it's something to be super aware of, because it can be incredibly expensive and hard to mitigate. So anytime I see ice damming, I always try to steer my client away from the house unless it's a really easy fix. But I hope that's helpful. All right, I hope you've gotten a lot of value out of that. Again, if you have, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, share it with your friends. Let me know what you find the most valuable in the video in the comments below. And as always, reach out to me, give me a call or text anytime. I'd love to connect with you regardless of your timeline. And if you're not quite ready to do that yet, make sure you download our relocation guide with the QR code above, or click the link in the description below, and get everything you need to know about moving to Bend. And I will talk to you soon. Take care.